The moon had been hollow for longer than most species had been alive. Someone, millions of years ago, had carved out its insides and filled it with shelves and corridors and cold storage rooms that stretched on for hundreds of kilometers. Nobody remembered who built it, but everyone knew what it held. It held the dead. Not bodies, records, final messages, last transmissions, the dying words of every civilization that had ever risen in the galaxy and then fallen into silence. The conclave of living species called it the Necropolis Archive, and it was the most important place in the known universe. Because if you wanted to survive, you studied those who did not. Archivist Kellen Dreth had worked inside the dead moon for 11 years. He was Valuri, tall, thin, with skin so pale it was almost see-through. His people lived on a water world near the edge of the Orion Arm, and they were known for their patience and their love of old things. He could sit for days, reading the crumbling records of species that had turned to dust before his own world had formed. He found comfort in their stories, even the sad ones, especially the sad ones. But today he was not comfortable. Today he was afraid. It had started as a routine job. 7 civilizations, recently decoded by the archive's translation engines, needed to be cross-referenced and cataloged. They were old, very old. The youngest had died 3 million years ago. The oldest had been gone for over 200 million. They came from different parts of the galaxy. They spoke different languages, breathed different air, and saw the universe through eyes that had nothing in common. There was no evidence that any of them had ever made contact with any of the others, and yet all 7 of them had left the same warning. Dreth found the first one buried in the final log of a species called the Morathian, a race of builders who had constructed cities that floated above gas giants. Their last entry, written as their sun was dying, contained a single instruction to whoever might find it. Do not approach the third world of the yellow star. The species there is not the danger. They protect something worse. He almost dismissed it. A dying species could say strange things. Fear did that. But then he found the same message in the records of the Ulvani, a collective mind that had once spread across an entire nebula. Different words, same meaning. Stay away from the third world. They guard something terrible. Then the Kishi said it. Then the Drawl. Then the Vothic remnant. Then the Pelori. Then the 7th, a species so old that their name was untranslatable, just a string of tones that no living throat could reproduce. But their warning was the clearest of all. The small world near the yellow star is a door. The creatures on its surface are the lock. Do not try to open it. 7 species, no connection, no contact. Millions of years and thousands of light years apart, all pointing at the same world. Dreth checked the coordinates 3 times. The third world of a yellow star in the outer arm of the galaxy. A small rocky planet, with 1 large moon, liquid water on its surface, and a breathable atmosphere. The conclave had catalogued it long ago, and placed it under strict quarantine. Its native species, short-lived, fragile, warm-blooded creatures called humans, had developed basic space travel within their own system, but had not yet reached the stars. They were all warning about Earth. Dreth gathered his findings and brought them to his superior, High Curator Ometh. She was old, even by the long-lived standards of her species. Her body was wrapped in robes that hid most of her form, and her 4 eyes moved slowly, as if the weight of everything she had seen made it difficult to look at anything new. She read his report in silence. Then she closed the file and told him to forget it. Dreth stared at her. He asked her what she meant. She told him again, more firmly this time. Forget it. Delete his notes. File the 7 civilizations under standard extinction causes and move on. He asked her why. She told him the conclave already knew. They had always known. The quarantine around Earth was not there to protect the galaxy from humans. It was there to make sure nobody disturbed what was beneath them. Beneath them, Dreth repeated. Ometh's 4 eyes closed, one at a time. She said a word he had never heard before. She called it the wound. Dreth pressed for more. He asked what the wound was. He asked how long the Conclave had known. He asked why the information was hidden from the archive's own scholars. Ometh raised one thin hand and told him that some knowledge was kept secret not because it was dangerous to share, but because it was dangerous to understand. She told him to go home, to eat, to sleep, and to wake up tomorrow and choose a different mystery. He did not go home. He went back to his workstation and began searching. He pulled every record the archive had on Earth. Most of it was surface level. Atmospheric readings, population estimates, cultural broadcasts the humans had leaked into space without knowing anyone was listening. But deep in the restricted files, he found references he could not access. Locked entries, sealed documents, things that required clearance levels above his own. And one of them was 900 million years old. He sat in the cold blue light of his screen and felt the silence of the dead moon pressing in around him. 900 million years. That was before complex life had even appeared on most worlds. Someone, something, had written about Earth before Earth had anything on it worth writing about. Unless it was not about what was on the surface. Dreth worked through the night. He cross-referenced. He searched. He mapped the extinction dates of every civilization that had ever mentioned Earth, and found a pattern that made his blood run cold. 62 species. Every single one that had shown interest in Earth, real interest, not just a passing note, had gone extinct. Not slowly, not from natural causes, suddenly, completely, as if someone had reached down and simply turned them off. He needed to tell someone. But when he went to find Ometh the next morning, her chamber door was open and the lights were off. She was dead. Her body was still in her chair, her 4 eyes open and empty. There was no mark on her, no sign of violence. She looked like she had simply stopped, the same way a machine stops when someone pulls the plug. Her terminal was still active. Someone had accessed the archive's oldest restricted file from her account, and then deleted it. Every trace of the document was gone. Every copy, every backup, every fragment. All that remained was a single coordinate, blinking on her screen like a heartbeat. Dreth leaned forward and read it. He did not recognize the location at first, but when he mapped it, his transparent skin went white. The coordinate pointed to a place on Earth, deep beneath the surface, deeper than any human had ever gone, at the very bottom of their largest ocean, in a trench so dark that no light had ever touched it. Something was down there. Something that 62 dead civilizations had tried to reach. And Dreth was now the only person in the galaxy who had all the pieces. He copied the coordinate, wiped his workstation, and ran. The news broke on a Tuesday, Galactic Standard Time. Dreth had not planned to become the most wanted person in the Conclave. He had planned to be careful, to find someone he could trust, to share what he knew quietly, and let smarter people decide what to do with it. But then the Conclave's security forces declared him the prime suspect in High Curator Ometh's death, and careful stopped being an option. He ran to the only species that would listen without asking permission first. The Ilwari were small, fast-moving creatures with too many legs and an obsession with the truth. They operated the galaxy's largest independent news network, and they had a simple rule. If the information was real, they published it. No delays, no politics, no fear. Dreth gave them everything. The 7 warnings, the 62 dead civilizations, the pattern, the wound. Within hours, it was on every screen, every broadcast, every neural feed in Conclave space. 32 species woke up to the same question. Why do all the dead civilizations warn about Earth? The answer terrified them. The Conclave's governing body met aboard the Halo of Reason, a diplomatic station the size of a small city that floated in neutral space between the three most powerful species. The session was supposed to be closed. It was not. Ilwari reporters had already gotten inside, and they broadcast every word to a galaxy that was watching with held breath. Three factions formed almost immediately. The interventionists, led by the Kethari military, argued the simplest solution: destroy Earth. Whatever humanity was protecting, it had already killed 62 species. The math was obvious. One small world was not worth the risk of losing everything. The preservationists, led by the older and more cautious species, argued the opposite. Every civilization that had moved against Earth was the one that died. Not Earth, not the humans, the attackers. The pattern was clear. Aggression toward Earth was suicide. The quarantine existed for a reason, and that reason was to keep everyone else alive. The Seekers, a smaller group made up mostly of scientists and scholars, wanted neither war nor ignorance. They proposed sending a research team to Earth. A quiet mission. No weapons, just questions. The debate raged for 3 days. Alliances shifted. Old grudges resurfaced. Species that had not spoken to each other in centuries suddenly found themselves on the same side, united by fear or curiosity or both. On the second day, Fleet Commander Sire Ren was ordered to reinforce Earth's quarantine. Ren was Kethari, an insectoid species known for their discipline and their love of clear orders. She had served in the Conclave fleet for 30 years, and had never questioned a command. But this one made her uncomfortable. She had read Dreth's data. She had studied the 62 extinctions, and she had noticed something that the politicians had missed in their panic. The dead civilizations had not just shown interest in Earth. Every single one of them had taken an aggressive action. A probe armed with weapons, a fleet sent to conquer, a biological weapon designed to wipe the surface clean. They had all, in their own way, tried to hurt Earth, and they had all died within days of trying. Not years, not months, days. Entire species, billions of individuals, spread across dozens of worlds, gone. As if something had reached across the stars and simply ended them. Not with fire or war or disease, with silence. They just stopped. Ren reinforced the quarantine line and kept her thoughts to herself. But she began pulling old military records, looking for anything the Conclave's admirals might have buried. She found more than she expected. Classified reports, hushed-up incidents, a Kethari scouting party that had entered the Sol system 400 years ago and never returned. A Palan research vessel that had gotten too close and was found drifting, its entire crew brain-dead, their collective consciousness scattered like ash in the wind. On the third day of the debate, Ambassador Turo asked to speak. Turo was Palan, a gaseous species that existed as a shared mind distributed across a cloud of particles. They were ancient, patient, and almost impossible to read. Turo had served as ambassador for longer than some species had existed. When Turo spoke, the chamber went quiet. Turo told them about the quarantine doctrine. Most of the Conclave believed the quarantine around Earth was a few thousand years old, established by an early version of their alliance as a standard precaution around developing species. This was wrong. The quarantine doctrine was not thousands of years old. It was 900 million years old. It had been written by the Alir, the first known spacefaring species in the galaxy's history. And it had been passed down through every alliance, every empire, every governing body that had risen and fallen in the ages since. The Alir had not just warned about Earth. They had worshipped what was beneath it. Turo projected the Alir's words into the center of the chamber, translated into every living language simultaneously. The ancient text glowed in the air like something sacred. We found it in the young world near the yellow star. It was already there when we arrived. It was there before the world had cooled. It was there before the star had formed. We believe it was there, before everything. We tried to study it. It allowed this. We tried to communicate with it. It allowed this too. Though its answers were not in words. They were in feelings, in dreams, in sudden understanding that came and went like light through water. We believed it was trapped. We were wrong. It did not wish to be freed. It had chosen its place. It had chosen to sleep beneath the surface, and to dream the world above it into being. The small ones on the surface, the fragile, short-lived ones that crawled and swam and would one day walk. They are its chosen wardens. They do not know this. They will not know this for a long time. But they are part of its dream, and it will not let them be harmed. We learned this the hard way. When we tried to take a sample from its surface, 3 of our worlds went dark. Not destroyed, just dark. Empty, as if they had never been. We stopped. We wrote this doctrine for every species that would come after us. Do not touch the 3rd world. Do not harm the wardens. The sleeper in the cradle has chosen them, and its patience is not the same as weakness. The chamber was silent for a long time after Turo finished. Some called it a myth. Others called it a death sentence. The Kethari military delegation demanded to know why this had been hidden from them. Turo answered simply, because the last species that learned the full truth tried to use it as a weapon. They planned to threaten the sleeper, to hold Earth hostage, to force it to serve them. They were the 62nd extinction on Dret's list. The debate ended without a vote. No one could agree on anything except fear. But fear, as it turned out, did not need a vote. Deep in Kethari space, a warlord named Shivan had been listening to the broadcasts. Shivan was not a politician. He was not interested in debates or doctrines or ancient warnings. He was a soldier, and soldiers solved problems with force. If something on Earth was a threat, then Earth needed to be removed. Final. He gathered his personal fleet, 47 warships, each carrying enough firepower to crack a planet's crust, and gave the order to move. No approval from the conclave, no warning, no hesitation. Commander Wren detected the fleet's departure 12 hours later. She sent an emergency alert to the conclave. She ordered her quarantine ships to intercept. But Chivan's fleet was faster, and he had chosen his route carefully, slipping through gaps in the patrol lines that should not have existed. By the time Wren realized she could not stop him, Chivan's armada was already entering the Sol system. And on Earth, in a small room filled with screens and blinking lights, a young technician stared at her display and felt her heart stop. 47 objects had just appeared near the orbit of Mars. They were not asteroids. They were not comets. They were moving in formation. She picked up the phone and made the call that would change human history forever. They were not alone. General Amare Bekele had prepared for this moment his entire career. He had run simulations. He had written protocols. He had argued in front of committees and presidents and security councils that humanity needed a plan for the days something arrived from beyond their solar system. Most people had smiled politely and moved on to other topics. Nobody was smiling now. 47 ships hung in the space near Mars, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They were dark, angular, covered in ridges that looked like the shells of enormous insects. They had appeared without warning and settled into formation with the kind of precision that spoke of long practice and absolute confidence. Bekele stood in the command center of Earth's United Defense Initiative, a room buried deep underground beneath the mountains of East Africa. Screens covered every wall, voices filled every channel. The world's militaries were scrambling, but Bekele knew the truth that none of them wanted to say out loud. If those ships wanted to destroy Earth, there was nothing humanity could do to stop them. He did the only thing that made sense. He opened a communication channel and broadcast on every frequency the human race could produce. We do not know who you are, but this is our home. State your intentions." The message traveled outward at the speed of light. It reached the alien fleet in minutes. There was no response. Bekele sent it again, and again. The fleet did not move. It did not answer. It simply waited, as if deciding something. Then, it decided. Warlord Siobhan had not come to talk. He had come to solve a problem. And the problem was Earth. The ancient warnings, the dead civilizations, the sleeper beneath the surface, all of it pointed to one conclusion in his mind. Earth was a threat, and threats were meant to be eliminated. He gave the order, and his flagship fired a single weapon. The Conclave called it a planet cracker, a warhead designed to split a world's crust and collapse its core. It was the most destructive device any living species had ever built. It crossed the distance between Mars and Earth in minutes, a bright point of light moving faster than anything human eyes could track. Every defense system on Earth detected it. Alarms screamed across every continent. Bekele watched the trajectory on his screen and felt a strange calm settle over him. There was no defense against this. No shield. No missile that could intercept something moving that fast. He had time for exactly one thought. "I'm sorry," before the warhead entered Earth's atmosphere. And then every sensor on every ship in the solar system went dark. It lasted exactly 3.7 seconds. Every screen went black. Every instrument stopped. For 3.7 seconds, the universe around Earth went completely silent, as if someone had pressed a pause button on reality itself. When the sensors came back, the warhead was gone. Not exploded, not deflected, not broken apart. Gone. Every trace of it had vanished, as if it had never existed. The atoms that had made it up were simply not there anymore. And aboard Siobhan's flagship, every single crew member was dead. The ships that survived, the ones farther back in the formation, sent panicked reports to each other. The flagship was drifting, its engines still running, its lights still on, its system still functioning perfectly. But every living being inside it was motionless. Their bodies were intact. There was no damage, no sign of attack, no residue of any weapon. Their brains had simply been turned off. Every neuron, every synapse, every electrical signal that made a mind work, shut down with a precision that no technology in the galaxy could match. The remaining ships turned and ran. They broke formation and scattered in every direction, pushing their engines beyond safe limits. Several of them crashed into each other in their panic. The rest disappeared into deep space, carrying their terror with them. On Earth, the alarms stopped. The sky was clear. The sun shone on a world that did not know how close it had come to ending. But deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Dr. Elena Vasquez knew something had happened. Vasquez was a geologist, though that word had stopped feeling accurate years ago. She studied a structure at the bottom of the Mariana Trench that had no business being there. It was enormous, a formation of material so dense that their instruments could barely measure it, extending downward through the ocean floor and into the Earth's mantle like a root from some impossible tree. She had spent 8 years studying it. Her team called it the Wound, because it looked like a scar in the planet's crust, a place where the rock had been pushed aside by something that had been there first. The Wound was 4.5 billion years old as Earth itself, and it hummed. Not loudly, not in a way that any normal instrument could detect. But Vasquez had built custom sensors, tuned to frequencies that no one else was listening to, and she had heard it. A low, constant vibration that never changed, never stopped, never varied by even a fraction of a frequency. It was too regular to be natural, too steady, too patient. During those 3.7 seconds, when every sensor in the solar system went dark, Vasquez's instruments did not go dark. The Wound had pulsed, a single, massive burst of energy that shot through her equipment and blew out half her monitors. And in that pulse, she detected something that made her sit down on the floor of her laboratory and stare at nothing for a very long time. The hum had a pattern. It had always had a pattern, but it was so slow, so stretched out across time, that no 8-year study could have caught it. The pulse had compressed it, squeezed millions of years of rhythm into a single moment, and her instruments had recorded it. It was a heartbeat. Whatever was down there was alive, and it had just woken up enough to swat away a weapon designed to crack planets, the way a sleeping person might brush away a fly. 3 hours later, Vasquez received a call from General Beckley. She had never spoken to him before. She did not know who he was, but he told her that something had just saved the Earth from an alien attack, and that military intelligence had traced an energy signature from the event to her research site in the Mariana Trench. He asked her what she had found. She told him the truth. She did not know what it was, but it was old, it was alive, and it was big, bigger than any living thing had a right to be. It might extend all the way to the Earth's core. It might go even deeper than that. Bekele was quiet for a moment. Then he told her something that the military had kept classified for 6 hours. During those 3.7 seconds of silence, every government on Earth had received a transmission. It had not come from space. It had come from below, from deep inside the planet. And it was in every human language at once, as if whatever sent it understood them all equally. The message was simple. They came, I answered. You are safe. Sleep well. She asked Bekele to repeat it. He did. She looked at her instruments, at the steady hum that had resumed the moment the pulse ended, and she understood something that she was not ready to understand. Something had been living beneath the Earth since before there was life on its surface. It had watched everything. The first cells dividing in warm water, the first fish crawling onto land, the first humans standing upright and looking at the stars. It had been there for all of it, patient and silent, and it had never once made itself known. Until someone tried to hurt them. Bekele asked her what she thought they should do. She said she did not know. But she said they should probably stop thinking of the Earth as a planet they lived on, and start thinking of it as something they lived with. Far away, hiding in the cargo hold of a smuggler's ship, Archivist Dreth watched the footage of the Armada's destruction on a stolen screen. He watched the flagship go dark. He watched the remaining ships flee like animals from a fire. Then he opened a channel and broadcast to every frequency the Conclave used. He sent the compiled warnings of every dead civilization alongside the new footage. And at the end, he added his own message. He asked the question that the galaxy could no longer pretend to ignore. What if humanity does not even know what they are guarding? The message spread like light through the dark. 32 species received it. 32 species watched the footage. And 32 species sat in silence, realizing that the small, fragile, short-lived creatures on that little blue world were not the threat. They never had been. The galaxy did not take the news well. Within hours of Drek's broadcast, 3 species withdrew from the Conclave entirely. They sealed their borders, recalled their diplomats, and went silent. 2 others began building weapons they had promised never to build. The Cathari military government, already shaken by the loss of Chavan's fleet, collapsed under the weight of public fury. Their people demanded to know why their leaders had sent ships to die against something that could not be killed. On the halo of reason, the diplomatic station had gone from a place of debate to a place of fear. Ambassador Toro floated through the empty corridors and felt something that the Palan collective mind had not experienced in 10,000 years. Uncertainty. And on Earth, humanity was trying to figure out what had just happened to them. The governments of the world had agreed, for the first time in human history, to share all their information openly. There was no point in secrets anymore. Aliens were real. They had tried to destroy Earth. Something had saved them, and that something was underneath their feet. General Bekele organized a joint task force. Military leaders, scientists, linguists, engineers, anyone who might be useful was brought together in a secure facility. Dr. Vasquez was put in charge of the scientific side, which made her uncomfortable. She was a geologist. She studied rocks. She was not equipped to study something that was older than rocks, older than the planet, possibly older than the sun. But nobody else was equipped either, so she did her best. She assembled a team and prepared a deep-dive expedition to the Mariana Trench. The goal was simple: get close to the wound, take readings, and try to understand what they were dealing with. No one was to touch it. No one was to attempt communication. They would observe, and nothing more. They used a specially built submersible, reinforced to withstand pressures that would crush a normal vessel. The water grew dark around them, until the only light came from their own instruments. Vasquez watched the depth counter climb, 7,000 meters, 8,000, 9,000, deeper than any human had gone before without a drone. At 11,000 meters, they saw it. The wound did not look like rock. It did not look like metal or crystal or anything that had a name. It was a surface, smooth, dark, faintly warm, that stretched across the ocean floor in every direction, disappearing into the black water beyond the reach of their lights. It looked less like a geological formation, and more like the skin of something vast. The instruments confirmed what Vasquez had suspected. It extended downward, through the mantle, through the outer core, through the inner core, and then kept going into dimensions that their equipment could not measure. It was not part of the Earth had formed around it. Vasquez ordered her team to hold position. They deployed sensors on long cables, lowering them gently toward the surface. The readings were impossible. The material was denser than anything in the periodic table. It radiated energy on frequencies that did not exist in standard physics. And it was warm, not hot, not cold, but warm, the way a living body is warm. One of her scientists, a young woman named Dr. Kira Patel, was monitoring the acoustic sensors. She turned to Vasquez with wide eyes and said that the hum was getting louder. Not threatening, not aggressive, just louder, as if whatever was down there had noticed them and was paying attention. Vasquez told everyone to stay calm. She told them to continue recording, and then she made a decision that was not in the mission plan. She lowered a sensor directly onto the surface. The moment it made contact, every person in the submersible gasped, not from pain, not from fear, from vision. All 6 of them, simultaneously, saw something that was not inside the submarine, and not inside their heads, but somehow both at once. They saw the beginning. Not a metaphor, not a dream. The actual beginning, the moment before the universe existed, and the moment it chose to exist. They saw the nothing that came before, and the everything that came after. And in between, they saw something that had been there for both, a presence, an awareness. Something that had existed when existence itself did not yet have a meaning. When the universe was born, it shattered. Its laws, its forces, its constants, they were all pieces of something that had once been whole. Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong force, the weak force, they were fragments, broken pieces of a single thing that had come apart in the explosion of creation. But one piece did not break. One piece stayed whole. One piece remained aware. It fell into the cooling dust of a new solar system. It settled into a young planet, still molten, still forming, and it slept. It dreamed, and as it dreamed, the planet above it changed. Water gathered, chemicals combined, cells formed, life began. The vision lasted 1 second. When it ended, half the team was crying. Dr. Patel had her hands pressed against the viewport, her breath fogging the glass. One of the engineers had his eyes closed and was whispering something in a language Vasquez did not recognize. Vasquez pulled the sensor back. She ordered the ascent. When they reached the surface, Dreth was waiting. He had arrived in the Sol system under a white flag, carried by a smuggler ship that had no loyalty to the Conclave and no interest in politics. He carried with him the complete Alir archive, the oldest records in the galaxy, stolen from the necropolis before he fled. He had risked everything to bring them to Earth, because he believed that the humans had a right to know what was beneath their world. Bekele met him on the deck of a naval vessel. It was the first time a human had stood face to face with an alien. Dreth was taller than any human, thin, with skin that showed the blue veins beneath. Bekele looked up at him and said nothing for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. Dreth did not understand the gesture. Bekele explained. It was a greeting, a sign of trust. You offered your open hand to show you carried no weapon. Dreth took his hand, and the first handshake between species lasted a long time. Together, Vasquez, Bekele, and Dreth decoded the Alir's most sacred text. It confirmed what the vision had shown, and added details that made the picture both grander and more frightening. The sleeper was not a creature. It was a function, the last intact piece of the force that had existed before the Big Bang. It was, in a sense, the universe's memory of what it used to be. It held certain laws in place simply by existing, the way a keystone holds an arch together. If it stopped existing, those laws would unravel. Physics would forget its own rules. Reality would come apart. It had not chosen Earth for any grand reason. Earth was simply where it fell. But over 4.5 billion years, it had watched life grow above it. It had observed every species that rose and fell on the surface. Every extinction, every recovery, every small creature that fought against the dark and survived. And it had grown attached. The Alir text described it with a word that Dreth translated carefully. Not love, not loyalty, something closer to recognition. The sleeper saw in living things, especially in humans, the most complex and contradictory things Earth had produced, a reflection of itself. They were small and temporary, but they dreamed. They imagined things that did not exist, and then made them real. They built and broke and built again. It did not protect humanity because they were special. It protected them because that is what you do for the ones who dream alongside you. This was the truth that 62 civilizations had died for, approaching wrong. This was the secret that the Conclave had buried. Not a weapon, not a monster, a companion. Something ancient and vast that had simply decided, without being asked, that the little creatures on its surface were worth keeping safe. But the Alir text ended with a warning that Vasquez read 3 times before she believed it. If the Wardens ever reject the sleeper, if they fear it and try to destroy it, it will not fight them. It will simply stop dreaming. And when it stops dreaming, the laws it holds in place will come undone. The universe will forget how to be. Vasquez looked at Bekele. Bekele looked at Dreth. And Dreth, who had crossed a galaxy to deliver this message, said the words they were all thinking. The greatest danger was never out there. It was never the aliens. It was never the sleeper. The greatest danger was the possibility that humanity would learn the truth and be too afraid to accept it. That night, Vasquez intercepted a coded transmission between members of Earth's own government. A group of leaders, terrified by what lay beneath them, had formed a secret council. They called themselves the Severance. Their plan was to cut the connection, to drive the sleeper out, to free humanity from what they saw not as a guardian, but as a chain. Vasquez read their plans and felt the ground beneath her feet in a way she never had before. Not as solid rock, as a promise. A promise that someone was trying to break. The Severance Council moved fast. They had to. Every hour that passed was another hour for Vasquez and Bekele to expose them, another hour for the world to learn what they were planning. They could not afford to wait. There were 11 of them, Presidents, ministers, generals, people who had spent their lives believing that power meant control, and that anything they could not control was a threat. The sleeper was the ultimate loss of control, something older than their world, bigger than their understanding, and completely beyond their ability to influence. It had saved them, yes, but it had saved them without asking, without explaining, without giving them a choice. And for people who had built their lives on choices, that was unbearable. They had a weapon. It was experimental, built in secret by a team of physicists who believed they were designing a new energy source. The device used concentrated antimatter pulses to destabilize molecular bonds at extreme depths. The Severance Council had repurposed it. If they could drive it deep enough into the Mariana Trench and fire it directly at the wound, they believed they could sever whatever connection existed between the sleeper and the Earth. They did not want to kill it. They wanted to push it away, to cut the cord, to stand on their own. They loaded the device onto a submarine and sent it into the Pacific before dawn. Vasquez found out 3 hours later, when a junior analyst in Bekele's task force intercepted a communication that should have been erased. The message was short. Device deployed. Estimated contact in 6 hours. She called Bekele. He called the Joint Chiefs. Calls turned into shouts. Shouts turned into orders. But the submarine was already deep, already running silent, and 6 hours was not a lot of time. Bekele scrambled a naval response, but the Pacific was vast, and the submarine was small, and the Severance Council had planned their route carefully. Military ships searched in grids, while the clock counted down. Dreth, still aboard the naval vessel, did the only thing he could think of. He accessed every communication channel available to him. Human broadcasts, conclave frequencies, Ilwari news networks, and began transmitting. He read the Alir warning in every language his translator could produce. He explained what the sleeper was. He explained what would happen if it was driven away. He begged. Across the world, people stopped what they were doing and listened. A taxi driver in Cairo turned up his radio. A teacher in Seoul paused mid-sentence. A child in Buenos Aires tugged her mother's sleeve and pointed at the television. The words were simple enough for anyone to understand. Something beneath the earth had been protecting them since before they existed. Some frightened people were about to drive it away. And, if they succeeded, reality itself would break. The world held its breath. Vasquez did not wait for the Navy. She commandeered a submersible from the research station, the same one she had used before, hatched and refueled, but barely tested. She told her team to stay on the surface. This was not a research mission. She did not know what it was. She only knew that someone needed to be down there, close to the wound, when the weapon fired. She descended alone. The waters swallowed her. The light faded. The pressure built. The submersible groaned and creaked around her, a small metal shell falling through black water towards something that had no name and no shape and no limit. She watched the depth counter climb and tried not to think about what she was doing. At 11,000 meters, she saw it again. The surface of the wound, smooth and dark and warm, stretching out beneath her like the floor of the universe. Her instruments picked up the hum, steady, patient, unchanged. Whatever was down there, it was not worried. It did not know what was coming. Or perhaps it did and simply did not care. It had survived the birth of the universe. A human weapon was not going to frighten it. But Vasquez was not worried about frightening it. She was worried about hurting it. Not its body, if it even had a body. Its feelings. Its willingness to stay. The Alir had been clear. The sleeper would not fight back against its wardens. If humanity rejected it, it would simply stop. It would close its eyes and let go, and the dream that held reality together would end. She checked the time. 90 minutes until the weapon reached firing depth. On the surface, Beckley's ships found the submarine, but it was deep, deeper than any of their weapons could reach, and it was not responding to communications. The Severance Council had locked out all external controls. The weapon would fire automatically when it reached the target depth. 60 minutes. Vasquez positioned her submersible directly above the wound. She did not know what she was going to do. She was a geologist. She studied rocks. She had no training for talking to ancient cosmic entities that lived inside planets. But she had spent 8 years listening to this thing's heartbeat. And somewhere in those 8 years, she had started to feel like she knew it. Not understood it. No human could understand something that old. But knew it, the way you know a neighbor whose face you see every morning. A familiar presence. A quiet companion. 30 minutes. The submarine reached firing depth. Vasquez's instruments detected the antimatter buildup, a growing hum of energy that was nothing like the sleeper's patient rhythm. This was sharp, angry, mechanical. The weapon fired. The pulse hit the wound like a hammer striking glass. For one terrible moment, everything shuddered. The water around Vasquez vibrated so hard that her vision blurred. Her instruments screamed. Alarms filled the tiny cabin, and above, across the galaxy, the universe flickered. Stars dimmed. Not all of them, not for long, but enough. On the halo of reason, conclave scientists watched their instruments show gravitational constants shifting. Numbers that had been the same since the beginning of time, suddenly wobbling, uncertain, as if the universe had forgotten its own weight. On a dozen worlds, species that had never prayed before found themselves praying now. The wound dimmed. Vasquez saw it through the viewport, the faint warmth fading from the surface below her, the hum growing quieter, the presence pulling back. Not in anger, not in pain, in sadness. She could feel it, the way you feel a change in temperature on your skin. The sleeper was not fighting. It was doing exactly what the Ailer had warned it would do. It was letting go. Vasquez did not think. She opened the emergency hatch at the bottom of the submersible, a small panel designed for deploying sensors by hand. The pressure should have killed her. The cold should have stopped her heart. But the wound was right there, inches below the hatch, and the water between them was strangely still, strangely warm, as if something was holding the ocean back just enough. She reached down and pressed her bare hand against the surface. It was warm. Not hot. Warm like the skin of something alive. She felt it against her palm and her fingers and the lines of her hand, and she felt something she could not describe. A vast attention turning toward her, slow and ancient and impossibly gentle, like an eye the size of a world, opening just a little to see who was touching it. She spoke. She did not plan the words. They came out the way breath comes out, because they had to. We're afraid. That's what we do. We're small, and we're scared, and we break things. But we also come back. We also reach out. I'm reaching out now. Please, please don't stop. The wound pulsed beneath her hand. Once, soft, like a heartbeat answering a heartbeat. And then something happened that no instrument could measure, and no language could describe. Every human on Earth, all 8 billion of them, felt it at the same time. It was not a sound, it was not a vision, it was a feeling, a wave that passed through every person alive, from the deepest sleeper to the most alert, from the oldest to the youngest. It was the feeling of being known. Not judged, not measured. Known, completely, entirely, without reservation. Every mistake, every cruelty, every act of cowardice, seen. And every kindness, every sacrifice, every moment of stubborn courage, also seen. 4 billion years of watching, and the verdict was not anger, or disappointment, or regret. The verdict was, I am still here. I choose to stay. The antimatter pulse dissolved. The energy scattered harmlessly into the rock. The wound brightened again, slowly, like a sunrise seen from underwater. The hum returned, steady and patient, the same rhythm it had kept since before life existed. Across the galaxy, the stars stopped flickering. The gravitational constants settled back into place. The universe remembered itself. Vasquez pulled her hand back and closed the hatch. She was crying, and she did not care. She took the submersible up, slowly, through 11,000 meters of dark water, and when she broke the surface, the sun was rising over the Pacific. The Severance Council was arrested within the day. There was no trial. Public opinion made one unnecessary. The world had felt what Vasquez felt. Every person alive had experienced that moment of being known, and none of them wanted to lose it. General Bekele drafted a message to the conclave. He stood in front of a camera in a plain room with a plain wall behind him. He did not wear his uniform. He spoke simply. We did not know what we were guarding. Now we do. We are not asking for your worship. We are not asking for your fear. We are what we have always been. Small, fragile, stubborn, and here. And we will hold this line for as long as we dream. The conclave voted to dissolve Earth's quarantine, not because the danger had passed, but because they finally understood that the danger had never been Earth or the sleeper. The danger was what any species might do when it encountered something it could not control. Fear was the enemy. It had always been the enemy. Dreth returned to the Necropolis Archive, a free scholar. The charges against him had been dropped. Ometh's real killer was found, a conclave intelligence agent who had been ordered to keep the secret buried. Dreth added a new entry to the archive, attached to every warning from every dead civilization. He wrote it carefully, in simple words, because he believed the most important truths should be easy to understand. Addendum to all recovered warnings regarding the third world of the Yellow Star. The dead were right. Humanity does protect something worse. Worse than any weapon. Worse than any fleet. Worse than extinction itself. They protect something that cares. And the galaxy was never ready for that. On a boat in the middle of the Pacific, Elena Vasquez sat with her feet hanging over the edge, her toes touching the water. The sun was warm. Far below, deeper than light could reach, the wound hummed its steady hum. The heartbeat of something that had been there before everything, and had chosen out of all the places in the universe to stay here. She closed her eyes. In the dark behind her eyelids, she could feel it. Vast, ancient, patient, dreaming alongside her. She smiled, and the dream held.